My niece had to die before McGill University implements these new programs.
Tonight, a Mi'kmaq woman left a Montreal hospital without getting the care she needed after being told she would be charged $1,000.
Doesn't stop now. We're gonna drop like flies, you know.
A spike of drug overdoses in Lethbridge and in the neighboring Blood Tribe has first responders struggling to keep enough naloxone on hand. Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. Montreal Hospital has changed the way it deals with patients who come in with no insurance. This comes in the wake of a coroner's report condemning the treatment of a Mi'kmaq woman. Tom Fontaine has the story.
In February of 2016, Kimberly Glode was brought to this Montreal hospital by ambulance. The 44-year-old Mi'kmaq woman was suffering from severe stomach pains. She had also recently had her purse stolen along with her health insurance card. She was told that without this card, it would cost over $1,000 to get treatment. She left without seeing a doctor. 6 weeks later, she was dead.
They should have helped my niece. They should have helped my niece. She was very sick.
Glode's family says Kimberly was the type of person to always look after others. Her uncle Jason gave APTN these photos of the last Christmas he saw her. At the time, he remembers asking her about a stocking that was sporting a question mark.
What does that mean? They got a question mark on the stocking. He says, that's for the one that's alone Christmas time. That's not going to be with anybody that may come here or may see on the street. You know, and we'll help them out and we'll bring them here.
This summer, Quebec's coroner released a report on Glode's death. It says that while Glode's cirrhosis was too advanced to be treated, she was denied the minimal accompaniment that decency requires in the face of death.
I certainly extend our sympathies to the family because this is, it was a very sad event that occurred.
The McGill University Health Centre, who run the hospital, held an internal investigation regarding the incident. Due to the passage of time and the amount of registration clerks working that night, they say they have not been able to track down the person who saw Glode after triage. Nonetheless, they've since implemented changes. Now every registration clerk must follow the same script when dealing with a patient who has no insurance.
The patient is told, we want you to be seen, and in fact, if you really think that you're going to leave, I want you to see the triage nurse again to see if that decision is a safe one.
Sidorowicz emphasizes that considering the hospital sees roughly 8 people a day with no insurance, this event was a tragic exception. She also says it has nothing to do with Glode being First Nations.
In our investigation, I don't think that was part of the issue at all.
For their part, Glode's family take little comfort in the actions taken.
My niece had to die before McGill University implements these new programs. We love Kim very much, and it hurts it still hurts to talk about.
Tom Fontaine, APTN National News, Montreal.
Winnipeg's police chief says he is disappointed in the outcome of the Raymond Cormier trial. Today is the first time Danny Smythe has commented publicly since Cormier's acquittal in the death of 15-year-old Tina Fontaine. Last week, a jury found Cormier not guilty of second-degree murder in the August 2014 death of Fontaine. Smythe says Winnipeg police put significant resources into the case, spending upwards of $1 million on the investigation. He says police do not have anything else to investigate at this point in Fontaine's death.
It's heartbreaking for the family. I think they were expecting a different outcome. I'm sure our investigators expected a different outcome. The evidence is what it is. We brought forward evidence where the Crown was confident and comfortable with laying a charge of murder, but it's a different standard for the jury. Conviction brings a standard of beyond reasonable doubt. Clearly they didn't see that.
And we would like to hear what you have to say about this or any other story. Here's how to contact us. Send an email to news@aptn.ca, like our APTN National News Facebook page. Follow us on Twitter @APTN News, or go to our website, aptnnews.ca. The Blood Tribe in southern Alberta has declared a state of emergency. The tribe has seen over 20 overdoses in the past week. Now some tribal members have stepped forward to learn about overdose prevention. But they say more needs to be done. Tamara Pimentel has the story.
Naloxone overdose prevention kits have been in high demand on the Blood Reserve. This week, the tribe was hit with a series of overdoses.
We had a total of 21 overdoses on the reserve that were documented in the last 5 days.
Compare that to the usual 5 to 10 in 1 month. Dr. Susan Christensen of the Blood Tribe Department of Health says the overdoses are connected to the recent crisis out of Lethbridge, a neighboring city to the reserve. Carfentanil has hit the streets of Lethbridge, causing roughly 54 overdoses in the past week. The substance, much more powerful than fentanyl, made its way onto the reserve.
Emergency medical services came to me to get what naloxone kits I had left because they have completely depleted their supply.
This is 1 vial of naloxone. Christensen says it's enough to turn a fentanyl overdose around. But for the recent carfentanil overdoses, 6 to 7 vials are needed.
Doesn't stop now. We're gonna drop like flies, you know.
Robin Calfrobe used to struggle with addictions, but turned to the clinic for help. He says he wants to see more youth doing the same.
It's time to quit. It's time to change. And I hope our people, the tribal council, is going to do their best to put a stop to this.
Today, the tribe declared a state of emergency. They are trying to obtain more police and ambulances and are directing band money to respond to the crisis. Christensen says being able to recognize an overdose can help as well.
I think every Canadian, through 2 or 3 relations has probably been personally affected by this crisis. And learning how to recognize the signs of an opioid overdose is very important.
Tamara Pimentel, APTN National News, Kainai Nation.
It's not an uncommon event in Thunder Bay, but this week 2 more people have had objects thrown at them from moving vehicles. That story and more coming up after the break. Here's a look at Saturday's weather forecast starting on the East Coast. Cloudy and +4 in Charlottetown, +3 in Halifax. Sunny and 3 above for Happy Valley, Goose Bay, +1 in Cartwright. +5 in Montreal, +3 in Quebec City and Saguenay. +5 under the sun in Windsor, 2 above in London, Toronto and Ottawa. 0 with snow in Thunder Bay, flurries and +2 in Sioux Lookout. -17 in Churchill, sunny and -12 in Island Lake. Snow in Winnipeg and +1. Snow and -3 in Brandon. That storm will impact southern Saskatchewan too. Snow and -4 in Swift Current and Regina. Sunny and -9 in Buffalo Narrows, La Ronge and Uranium City. Welcome back. The federal government recently announced they were looking to make changes to the Fisheries Act. Although the feds say the key focus of the changes are strong and meaningful protection for fish and waters, First Nations in BC who oppose open net fish farms are worried about that move. Lori Hamlin reports.
Piscine reovirus, also known as PRV, is a potentially deadly fish virus that has long been fought over by industry, government, scientists, and First Nations. The Department of Fisheries and Oceans has been under pressure to test for PRV in BC open net fish farms. Now, proposed changes to the Fisheries Act could mean that responsibilities for fish farms moves to another department. And that move concerns people in BC that are opposed to the farms and want them shut down.
All these little chess moves that they're enjoying right now is nothing more than to obfuscate the facts that are coming out now.
The facts that Chief Bob Chamberlain is referring to is the science of Piscine reovirus. The worries that PRV in farmed Atlantic salmon could be a threat to wild salmon when migrating past open net fish farms. Chamberlain fears DFO might be looking to hand responsibility for testing fish over to the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. DFO does not currently test farmed fish for PRV, and PRV is not a disease regulated by the Canadian Food Inspection Agency.
To remove disease testing and transfer of fish from DFO, who has a precautionary principle to guide it, to the CFIA, which does not, To me, it's just another piece of a complicated shell game where DFO continues to support the industry at the expense of its primary obligation of looking after wild salmon and the environment here in BC.
Keegan Peppersmith, a lawyer with EcoJustice, says the notice of intent is concerning.
We don't actually know what they're proposing to amend. All we know and all we have in front of us is this notice of intent to amend Section 56 published on their website. But what we do know is that it had some really concerning language in it. The first is that they intend to transfer the consideration of disease risks to CFIA. The second is that they used what we would call euphemisms such as reducing regulatory overlap, increasing efficiency, reducing burden on businesses for what we are saying is an abdication of the minister's responsibility.
APTN News requested an interview with the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. They refused. But in a written statement, the minister's office said DFO scientists are doing extensive research to better understand PRV and any impacts it might have on wild salmon populations in Canada. A decision on the proposed changes are expected this fall. Laurie Hamlin, APTN National News, Vancouver.
It's been called an unprecedented amount as the federal government announced $1.3 billion over 5 years for conservation earlier this week in its budget. But what do Indigenous water and land protectors think about it? We spoke to Ariel Deranger. She is the director of the Indigenous Climate Action Group. Ms. Deranger, thanks for joining us. $1.3 billion sounds like a lot, but what's your take on the announcement?
Well, you know, I think that this announcement is just the posturing of the Trudeau government, and it's right out of the playbook of the Liberals to try and win the votes of the Indigenous population. To be frank, they were elected by millennials and Indigenous people, and they're really making a play to try and continue to maintain those votes for the next upcoming election, and that's what this is. That's simply what it is, winning votes.
The budget promised to work more closely with Indigenous communities to establish a network of conservation areas. What's your opinion on those?
Well, the fact of the matter is Canada is failing when it comes to conservation. We surpassed Brazil in deforestation a few years ago. We're continuing to deforest because we're not actively taking great measures for conservation. And it's First Nations communities that have been opposing the very projects that are causing massive deforestation, like Alberta's tar sands or LNG projects or mega hydro. And so the reality is they have to work with First Nations. This isn't some, bold statement that they're doing. It's actually them trying to marginally meet some of the promises that they were elected on. Again, it's just them trying to win votes for the next upcoming election. This is just like the Kelowna Accord, the promise of $5 billion after the election, and this money isn't going to come on stream until 2019.
Another promise was to build Indigenous capacity to conserve land and animals. Would you consider that progress?
It's the optics of progress, absolutely, but I wouldn't call it actual progress. If they were serious about conservation and species protection, we wouldn't still be talking about tar sands expansion, pipeline corridor expansion. We wouldn't be talking about massive LNG or fracking or mega hydro. All of these projects threaten the biodiversity of this country, and we are not meeting our international commitments when it comes to biodiversity management or the respect of Indigenous rights. If we want to talk about real reconciliation in this country, it's going to be more than just conservation dollars to work in partnership. We need to move beyond co-management and move to restoring the rights of Indigenous peoples over their autonomy over their lands and territories.
A guest on APTN's Nation to Nation noted that if more Indigenous people worked on the ground in conservation, something like 2014's Mount Polley mining disaster in BC could have been prevented. Is that something you'd agree with?
I absolutely agree that if we have more First Nations involved with the management of our lands and territories, we would see less environmental disasters like Mount Polley. But the reality is co-management isn't going to give us the authority we need over our lands and territories. If we're talking about real management of our lands and territories, it's giving it back. And there's now precedence for that. The new president of South Africa, President Ramaphosa, just had the Land Seizure Act that was just passed, where he said that we must ensure that our people's dignity is restored without giving compensation to those who stole our land. If we want real compensation, we want to see real progress when it comes to conservation and management of our lands and territories, we need to be talking about restoring Indigenous rights and control over lands and territory. This bill and this money is not going to do that.
What would a green budget look like from an Indigenous perspective?
Well, I think it actually has less to do with dollar amounts and has to do with giving First Nations the abilities to have control over their lands and territories. No amount of money is going to fix the issue. It's going to come from actual real progress in giving First Nations the rights and control over their lands and territories. Then we would actually start to see that real progress. The fact of the matter is Indigenous peoples, lands and territories worldwide sit atop of 80% of the world's biodiversity. We have to be leaders, not just people that are consulted, but leaders in seeing how our lands and territories are managed. And that's not going to just come with money, that's going to come with power and control.
Ms. Duranje, we're going to have to leave it there, but thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
To Thunder Bay now, where police are asking the public for help. They're investigating 2 drive-by incidents. Earlier this week, eggs were thrown at people from passing vehicles. APTN's Willow Fiddler has the story.
Police say both victims had eggs and other unidentified objects thrown at them in separate incidents that occurred on the same night.
In these 2 incidents that we're investigating right now, I can confirm that both of the individuals in these incidents were Indigenous.
Both victims were male, and one was taken to hospital for injuries. Police say these incidents are criminal acts of assault.
Absolutely. Anytime there's any type of force put upon another person that is unwanted, that's an assault.
So the charges in these types of incidents are rare. They're not isolated or uncommon. APTN talked to Thunder Bay residents outside of City Hall. This man said he had a similar experience just days ago after slipping on some ice as he walked down the street.
I slipped, and this white truck came by with about 4 wobskias in there, yelling, "Indians, go home, get your drunk ass home." I slipped.
Another resident said he's never experienced anything like this, but says it has to stop.
It's disheartening. I mean, it shouldn't happen. You know, I don't know what to say. Let's put it this way. I certainly don't approve of it. You know, and I don't think there's anything funny about it at all.
Last year, teenager Braden Bushby was charged with second-degree murder in the death of Barbara Kentner. The 34-year-old First Nations woman he is alleged to have hit with a trailer hitch as she walked down a Thunder Bay street. Police say there are challenges to pressing charges in these drive-by incidents.
A lot of times in these types of incidents, it's really difficult to find the person who would have, or the vehicle connected to the incident, because it happens so fast and the person walking down the street is taken, by surprise. They're just trying to take care of themselves, their own safety, their welfare, and a lot of times they're not looking for grabbing that information. So
one Facebook user wrote to APTN with her experience. "I didn't report it because they would be gone by the time I would come out of being shocked." Police advise anyone encountering a drive-by incident to get descriptions of the vehicle and report it. The preliminary hearing for the man accused of killing Barbara Kentner is scheduled for September. Willow Fiddler, APTN National News, Thunder Bay.
Time for another quick break, but stick around. There's more to come. Here's the rest of Saturday's weather forecast, picking back up in northern Alberta. -8 in Peace River and Fort McMurray. Cloudy and 10 below in Red Deer and Calgary. Over to the west coast. +8 in Victoria, Tofino and Campbell River. -6 under the sun in Prince George. -11 in Dease Lake. In Yukon, -15 in Dawson City and Mayo. Over to NWT, -12 in Fort Resolution and Yellowknife. -28 on Saturday in Saxe Harbor, 24 below in Paulatuck. In Nunavut, -16 in Arviette and Whale Cove, -18 in Chesterfield, -23 in Igloolik on Saturday, -28 in Resolute. Welcome back. When you hear of competitions like Miss Teen Ontario, images of glamour, grace, and all things beautiful come to mind. But this year's winner, 18-year-old Illyria McKay of Six Nations, brought the judges down to earth with a sobering message about youth suicide. APTN's David Moses brings us more.
When you see Illyria McKay, there is no question that she has everything you'd expect to win a competition like Miss Teen Ontario. But look beyond the image and you'll see that she's not just a pretty face.
So my platform as Miss Teenage Ontario is raising awareness for youth suicide on reserves, because it's a huge problem and it's been ignored for a very long time.
Her choice to go with this platform began in the classroom.
In high school, I was in the academic streams, and there wasn't that many Native kids at my school, and there was even less Native kids in the academic streams, the university streams for those courses. And when issues like that came up in the news, sometimes in my history classes we would discuss it, and the amount of ignorance was astonishing.
For Illyria, suicide became a familiar issue after attending funerals of friends and other youth. The issue eventually hit home for Illyria and her family.
So the topic of youth suicide on reserves, it's a personal one for us because Illyria is a survivor. She made an attempt in April of last year.
For Illyria, that understanding led to her wanting to share her experiences. She wrote a play that was performed at her school, which has already had an impact on the actors.
Why did she do it? But that's the thing. I didn't need to ask that question because I already knew.
When I first saw the words on the script, I had no idea what was going on, and I was just so taken aback. I'm like, I couldn't understand where someone so close to us could go through something like this and us not know anything about it. And I just felt so disappointed that I wasn't told, or we weren't communicated this in any form.
Well, sometimes I don't mention it just because I don't know how people are going to respond, and I'm very comfortable talking with it. I'm very comfortable telling other people about it because I do believe that the more you talk about it, the more it does take away the stigma. And although it doesn't, I wouldn't want to say that it normalizes it, it makes other people feel like they're not alone.
We are not a story, but we do ask that you listen.
Illyria's play, entitled "And She Split the Sky in Two," will be performed one more time on March 7th at Waterford District High School. David Moses, APTN National News, Brantford, Ontario.
Illyria is now preparing for Miss Teen Canada pageant, which will take place this July, and we wish her all the best. And that is your APTN National News for this Friday. For news anytime, visit our website, aptnnews.ca. APTN Investigates is up next. I'm Dennis Ward. Have a great weekend.
Wasn't very much, but I hurried off to school just to find the white kids laughing and making fun of me and my frozen bannock sandwiches my cook made for me. My frozen bannock sandwiches my cook made for me. When she put some jam on them, I was happy to